Islam, unfortunately, today is in a prison. Now, that prison is not Abu Ghurab, and that prison is not, what's the place in Cuba? Guantanamo Bay. That's not where Islam is in prison at. No, Islam is in a prison of Muslim nationalism, Muslim ethnicity, Muslim culture. Because Muslims, every single group of Muslims want to put Islam and trap it and wrap it in their own ethnicity. Because human beings have done that throughout the years. They want to take the religion of God and they want to put it in their own bottle. They want to market it in their own name, under their own language, under their own culture. And if it were not for the basic precepts of the Aqidah, meaning the monotheistic practice of Islam, some Muslims would also make an Arab God, an Indian God, a Pakistani God, an African God, another God. They would do that. Because this is the nature of human beings to do that. But fortunately, the first principle of Islam is La ilaha illallah. That there's none to be worshipped except Almighty God, and there should not be any depictions. And this is not an anthropomorphic concept. God should not be depicted as a man, or as a woman, or as a child, or as a tree, or as a bird, or as the sun, or the planets. And God is not in the world, but God has created the world. And the world is creation, and God is the creator. And since most Muslims, I say 95% of all Muslims will observe that, then we cannot make a cultural, nationalistic, or ethnical representation of God. But Islam as a faith, unfortunately, has been subdued and has been trapped by culture. And because of this, many misconceptions, many distortions, many misrepresentations have taken place regarding Islam, and you Muslims and we Muslims should be very honest that some of those misrepresentations and some of those distortions is not the fault of non-Muslims, whether the media or private citizenship. Some of it is the fault of Muslims themselves. And we must be honest about that. We should not be in denial about that. We should not always be pointing the finger at somebody else. No. If I'm standing behind a cracked glass, I should not get an attitude when people see a distorted figure. Maybe I should remove that cracked glass. Or I should move away from it so people can get a clear view. Then what they get a clear view about, then I will say, why are you still saying something distorted when I'm giving you a clear view? Islam is in the prison of nationalism. Islam is in the prison of culture. And Islam is in the prison, the confines of ethnic preferences. And it can only be released by the practice and the use of the sources of Islam, which are the Quran and the Sunnah. And I repeat that for our non-Muslim guests. If you want to know something about Islam, the source you need to go to is the Quran. Not the Muslims. The next source you need to go to is the prophetic behavior of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the legislative sources of Islam. These are the religious sources of Islam. And if you want to know anything, you must go to the sources. I will not know about New Zealand by just walking down the street and seeing some people from New Zealand and say, I know everything about New Zealand. Look how these people are. No, I have to know about the language, to know about the history, to know about the culture. I have to go to the Chamber of Commerce. I go to the town hall. I have to go to the museums. I have to go to the universities. I have to talk to the people, you know, say, who are the common people. I got to talk to the intellectual people. I got to talk to people in government. I got to talk to the people in neighborhoods. I got to talk to male and female and children. I got to look at the whole package to understand what is this country called New Zealand. What are their values? What are their principles? What is their legislation? What kind of government do they have? Then I can, if I am still an objective person, I can then make a well-rounded decision, or I can make a well-rounded opinion or assessment and say, I have visited New Zealand, and when I transfer that idea to people, and if I am still objective, probably I have tapped into the sources. I say the non-Muslim cannot look at a Muslim woman and say, oh, see how these Muslims are? and see a Muslim man and say, oh, see how these Muslims are? Or read a headline in the news and say, oh, see how those Muslims are? No, that's not fair. That's not objective. It's not being comprehensive. Most of you have a computer at home. If you want to know about Islam, you don't have to talk to Muslims. If I want to know about the stock market, I don't have to go down to the stock market. I don't have to go to the stock exchange. I can go right, I can put in Google. Google, gaggle, giggle, whichever you got. And just put in Quran, Quran, put that in. See what comes up. Put in Muhammad ibn Abdullah, because you get a whole lot of Muhammads. But put the son of Abdullah, because that's the first Muhammad, and the first Muhammad ibn Abdullah, the prophet and the messenger of God. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. Then you look to the sources. What is the Quran as a book? What is the Quran as a source of legislation? What is the Quran as a source of inspiration? What is the Quran as a source of education? What is it? Who is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What is his biography? What is his manner? What were his habits? What were his principles? What is his legacy? Look at it, study it, take a day, take 2 days. If you're really concerned, take 3 days. Make an objective study. After you do that, then start seeing Muslims in the history, in the present, and see what has happened to these Muslims. See how they've been shattered and spattered and splattered all over the world. And see why they themselves are presently in a disarray. And people who are in transition, people who are in disarray, they cannot themselves reflect the true sources of their beliefs. And that is being fair. As a historian, as a sociologist, as an educator, as a teacher, I have to take all those things into consideration when I talk about the Muslims, when I talk about Islam, when I talk about the Quran, when I talk about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when I talk about the phenomena of Islam and Muslims in the modern world today. I have to take all those things into consideration. And I think that any one of you non-Muslims who are even-minded people, decent people, objective-minded people, open-minded people, people who themselves are not filled with prejudice, who haven't already made up their minds before they examine the sources, I think any one of you will go home and reread and rethink and reassess. And I think that you will be surprised with what you come up with having done that. For us Muslims, we have to bring our thoughts, ideas, and feelings into accordance with what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought. And what is that? The Quran and the Sunnah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, none of you truly believes until you bring your hawa, your desires, your feeling, your ideas, your emotions into accordance with what I have brought. That means he said, la yu'min. You're not a believer. You can say you are a Muslim, but you're not a believer until you bring your desires, your feelings, and your emotions into accordance, and your inclinations into accordance with what I have brought. What did he bring? He brought the Quran. He brought the Sunnah. He did not bring his Arabism. He brought the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran is a legislation, and the Sunnah as an explanation. So we Muslims must bring our desires, our feelings, our emotions, and our inclinations into accordance with what he brought.